students of Reddit, what is something your teacher did that really pissed the whole class? Head teacher of my high school tried to expel me for having an epileptic seizure in front of him. Said I was a danger and distraction to others pupils and was disrupting his school. I ended up being kept out of school for 2 months while my parents fought my case. In that time almost all of the rest of the teaching staff, who were furious with this decision, kept me supplied with work and even one-to-one tutoring when needed. This was in a rural area where the next nearest school was 40 miles away, so we had no other school choice. My brother was finding his balance of medication while in high school and would have a seizure every so often in class. That by itself is embarrassing. Why the hell would somebody make it much more difficult for you? I'm sorry, friend. People suck. 40-degree weather, Celsius, in outback Australia, and she wouldn't turn on the aircon in class even though it worked. Her reason was that when she was young she didn't have an aircon, and she survived. All the students hated her. Mine was the reverse. Middle of winter up in the Blue Mountains, bitch wouldn't turn the heater on in the mornings because she grew up without heated classrooms. And it's like, yeah, but you guys also were allowed to wear giant coats, were you not? Forced us to make a donation to a charity. When I didn't bring anything in, I got a demerit. Had to argue that not everyone has the ability to give something away. She then told me off for backchatting in front of the class. Everyone was like, WTF. God, you just gave me a flashback. I remember I had a teacher. She never actually taught me. I don't even know what her position at the school was. Yell at me for not bringing in canned foods for the food drive. She said I was lazy and not thinking of those less fortunate. She even took my agenda out of my desk and wrote it in my daily calendar to bring food. Like, sorry, I can't bring in food I don't have, but joke's on her though. I never used that agenda anyways and I still didn't bring stuff in. She didn't believe in field trips because she said that kids would have too much fun and learning isn't supposed to be fun. However, the entire grade would take the trip, so she was required to take us. So she would make us all sit in a common area of the zoo, museum, etc., and she would hold classroom lessons. It was so upsetting to hear about all the cool things the other kids got to see while we had class. He would act like he was enlightened and say like video games rot your brain. All your free time should be spent on education as that is all that matters, but then during the lessons he would go completely off topic and start talking about random. Apparently he is making a board game that could compete with chess because he is just that brilliant. I had a college professor who was teaching a history course to a bunch of education majors in their junior year. She would ask us questions all the time about things she hadn't yet lectured on and then pull the really? No one knows the answer to this? Well, I guess we'll just wait for someone to answer. We were all education majors. We knew that trick. We waited her out every single time. She always broke first. Edit. People keep asking what's the trick. This was a poorly executed attempt at using the Socratic method. It's better to have students arrive at an answer themselves than it is to tell them. However, you have to first create an environment of trust and respect so that students are comfortable enough to risk a wrong answer, and you have to be willing to provide a little bit of scaffolding should no one know. This professor did neither of those things. We were about 10-11 years old. It was the last period of the day and the music teacher was subbing our science class. He was sitting on the computer and we were all getting on with work. Towards the end of the period, our homeroom teacher comes into the classroom and exclaims, "It's the end of the day. Why are you all not packed up?" To which the music teacher replied, "I told them and they refused to." Excuse you. He hadn't said a thing to us, so we all protested. Even so, our homeroom teacher told us off for being disobedient as the music teacher slithered out of the room and we had to stay 10 minutes late as punishment. Lying snake. 2 words. Collective punishment. Teachers of Reddit, if you want your whole class to instantly hate you, this is how you do it. Another thing I remembered. We had to go to a nearby sports field for PE, which was about a 10-minute walk from the school. We only had a 5-minute gap between lessons. No matter how many times we explained we had PE, some teachers would always kick up a fuss if we were late to the lesson after PE. It also led to students missing the school bus if you had PE as the last lesson of the day. I'm pretty sure some parents complained because they started ending PE lessons 5-10 minutes earlier. Spent the entire semester in uni telling us half the material would not be on the semester exam. Guess what? All the material was on the semester exam and it tanked all of our scores because the professor was a dick and hated that people go to uni to get a qualification for a job. He hated anyone in his class that didn't aspire towards a career in academia. The class was doing a project on criminal justice and held a mock trial. My friend got assigned to play the role of a sexual assault victim. In real life, she had been a victim of an assault that was very similar to that of the character. She felt it would be too emotionally draining and tried to get out of the part. The teacher wanted an explanation, but my friend kept saying it was very personal. This went back and forth a few times over the next 2 days and it was just not clicking in the teacher's head. Finally he lost his patience and yelled out, "You are holding up this whole project for everyone. Why the hell is this so difficult for you?" With the whole class paying attention, she admitted she had been sexually assaulted the same way this character had, and went to go cry. They changed the topic of the project after that, but the class never really looked at the teacher the same way again. My dad died when I was in year 10, so I was off school for a few weeks. My first English lesson back, my very young and inexperienced teacher decided to study a poem about a dead father. I was sat in the front row and trying really hard not to lose it. I can't remember the exact line, but something hit home and I just had to get out of the room. So I stood up and bolted. As I stood outside the room trying to calm down, I heard the entire classroom erupt. Every student was shouting at this woman for being so insensitive. 15 years later I have a slightly different perspective on this. I am now an English teacher and I work in a school where things like bereavement are not always communicated to staff. I am sure that my English teacher didn't know about my situation, or at least I really hope so. I am terrified that I will make a similar mistake, and so before every poem about death or difficult content I give a little trigger warning. I don't want any student of mine to feel the way I did. My 6th grade science teacher was the worst. She once made the class do a grammar lesson instead science because she'd seen a sign in a storefront that morning that had poor grammar. When I refused to do the assignment because it had nothing to do with science, she tried to give me detention. Once during class, she took a little rubber ball from me because I was playing with it during class. She told me I could have it back at the end of the day, but when I went to get it she acted like she didn't know what I was talking about. I brought my mom to the room to try to get it back, and she told my mom that the ball was a visual aid and that I must have made up a story about her taking it so I could have it. My mother was the one who bought me the ball, and she was livid that my teacher was accusing me of lying. The principal got involved, and my teacher eventually admitted that I was telling the truth but said she'd lost the ball. My sister saw her playing with it later. She got in trouble, but I never got the ball back. Grown-ass woman acting like a child. My history teacher got divorced a few weeks before that happened and his wife got full custody. So he was very pissed for the next, well, it's been 5 years and he's still really pissed. So, one of my classmates didn't know about that, but he was friends with one of his sons, so he asked if he, the teacher's kid, could maybe come over to his place. He was about to tear up, but instead he got up and gave us a test on things that we were supposed to learn about that day. Of course we knew nothing and he called all of our parents and just made a huge mess for himself. In elementary school, every year the 8th graders got to go to either Montreal or Ottawa for an end of year trip. My brother went a few years before me and told me how awesome it was. They got to go to Hershey Factory too. When my turn rolled around, we had a new teacher. She was very into sports, and not much else. She even forgot to actually assign any artwork that year, but we had PE every other day at least. March rolls around and she sits on a desk and talks to us about our end of year trip. You know, I don't think the usual trip is really gonna be that fun. Instead I was thinking we could go to generic sports camp. This was immediately met with an almost unanimous disapproval. Even the sporty kids didn't want to do this. We had been waiting for our turn and this new lady just shat all over it. In the end 6/32 kids went to the camp. Apparently it sucked mayo. Thanks for watching. Please consider liking the video and subscribe if you want more Ask Reddit.